The Bengals have Joe Burrow. They have yet to pay Jamar Chase. They've yet to pay T. Higgins. They've made quite a few cuts. They have a lot of cap space, and there's still a lot of offseason. I mean, the offseason technically hasn't even started. We're in the infancy stages of it technically, so don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and act like the Bengals aren't going to do absolutely anything, but it's like there's still a lot of questions and doubts and concerns about the motives of the Bengals behind the scenes as far as what their true big picture plan is for this upcoming offseason. And I am curious, with all these roadblocks that continue to be talked about, when it's complicated. Jamar Chase's contract, T. Higgins' contract. Joe Burrow got his. Trey Hendrickson wants to be paid for his production, and we're so conditioned with the Bengals to feel like, oh man, there's all these roadblocks in the way, and the reality is there shouldn't be. There probably is, but there shouldn't be. When you look at what the Eagles do you believe that makes it look worse for the Bengals when they sit here and scream about some of the financial roadblocks that come into play here when they've barely spent any money on their roster, and they're having a hard time getting deals done with T and Jamar and Trey Hendrickson? But when you watch the Eagles, who not only are spending a ton of money, they're paying guys at the top of their market value, and they're winning Super Bowls on top of it. Do you believe it when this news comes out as Bengals fans, do you sit there and be like, ugh, this just makes us look even worse? Do you feel that is the case?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go back to baseball real quick. When the Dodgers can get whatever they want, whoever they want, for an infinite amount of money, and then I see Jack Flaherty and other baseball players tweet out, "See, this is why you pay guys. They aren't the villains; they're the heroes." Yeah, of course it makes the Bengals look bad because there's a franchise that's successful doing what players want, which is to be paid at what Kinner just said, at market value. So, yeah, it makes the Bengals look terrible. It makes the Bengals look in a lesser realm than the Philadelphia Eagles. And they are in a lesser realm, right? You think of the Philadelphia Eagles, we've ranted and raved about their front office, about ownership, about how much better they are than the Bengals in terms of dollars and cents. So, yeah, when we see a running back go for over $20 million a year, it's you look at the Bengals who are quote unquote not close with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, two elite weapons who the Eagles would 1,000,000% pay immediately. The second that if Jamar Chase was a Philadelphia Eagle, the second that window opens, he'd have a contract. Mm-hmm. Same thing with T. Higgins. Franchise tag, no way. We'll just sign you now. Don't need a franchise tag. You'll save that for somebody else. So, yeah, it makes the Bengals look worse. It makes the Bengals look lesser. And I think the reality of the situation is that there will always be teams at the top and there's always teams at the bottom. Bengals are a team at the bottom when it comes to spending money.
We talked about ownership value and everything like that when we were going over when Joe Burrow said that the Eagles pay everyone, that's what the Bengals should do. And we said that, Jeffrey Lurie and Mike Brown seem to have a relatively similar value. Well, another thing that makes it very easy for the Eagles to do what they're able to do is in December, as soon as it was passed by the NFL to sell minority interests of the team to family investors, Jeffrey Lurie and the Eagles jumped right on that. Sold an 8% stake, the first team in the NFL to do so, for $8.3 billion. That $8.3 billion, that's just cash that you can use on extensions and help with signings and everything along those lines. So this continues to emphasize that the issues that the Bengals have in front of them and the ones we talk about all the time with the cash and all the other hurdles they have to go through in order to extend star players and guarantee money, this just continues to emphasize that it is possible. And there are avenues to make their life easier, and they continue to turn their nose at them, up at them, and say, we don't want to do that. We want to maintain complete control. We want to, do things our way. It's a family-owned business, yada, yada, yada. And they are not taking the abilities that the NFL has given them to level the playing field with richer ownerships in bigger markets and everything along those lines. These ownership groups that have more cash, that give them an advantage at the negotiating table. The Bengals have been given an olive branch by the NFL to level that playing field. It's basically exactly what we asked for in the MLB. Can we have any way to compete with the salaries of these big market teams? And the NFL gives these teams and these other owners a chance to do that, a chance to compete, and the Bengals don't take advantage of it. I don't know why. That's the only reason the Eagles are able to pay everyone is because they have the cash. They take advantage of the ways the NFL gives them to get that. I can't understand why the Bengals don't.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm glad they sold the naming rights to the stadium.
They had to.
Welcome to 1995.
Yeah.
I mean, other teams have been doing that for decades, and the Bengals just got in on it because they knew they'd be a colossal joke if you didn't pay Joe Burrow. Well, now it's time to pay other superstars, so we got to find other ways to do it. If you're going to be unwilling to do it in the year 2025, I have a hard time believing at any point in the future under this current ownership group that the Bengals would ever do anything like this, and that says a lot. Now, again, I'm not hitting the panic button. These deals are going to get done. At least one deal is going to get done before we start screaming and yelling at ownership. So I'm going to give them a little bit of leeway here. But we've talked about it for weeks now. If you get them done earlier than they do, if you don't wait until the last second of the test to answer, it's like you got to put some thought into this. And maybe they do, and they're like, you know what, we just don't have the money up front. And if that's the case, that's the case. I don't know. I mean, really don't know what to say anymore. But financially, the Bengals should not be hindered by this. And still, they're, again, the quote being not close with Jamar Chase boggles the mind.
So, like in baseball, when we say, man, when the Dodgers do what they do, does that make the Reds look bad? I always say no, because
Of course,
how many teams? Well, real quick, the only reason I say this is because how many teams are there like the Dodgers that do that? I'm not saying they're the only ones, but like there's less than a handful of teams that do what the Dodgers do with that. Let me ask you this about the Eagles. There's like, so you could say there's the Dodgers and the Yankees that operate that way, and maybe, the Padres have spent a crap ton of money too, which is wild. But like when you look at the NFL, you have the Eagles and who is that second team that does what the Eagles do? What I mean is the Eagles seem to me, and you guys could prove me wrong here because I can't think of a second team that's doing what the Eagles are doing. They're doing something so different that I'm kind of not defending the Bengals because they need to get their stuff together. I think that, I feel like even if you pay T, Jamar, and Trey, they'll still be the critics out there. But I think that would at least put the Bengals in a different conversation of saying, well, we're never going to be what they are, but we're at least doing what we need to keep our stars in town. I think that's a separate conversation. The Reds are never going to do what the Dodgers are going to do, but at least show activity that you're trying to add pieces to the roster. Who is that second team in the NFL that's doing what the Eagles are? I think it would be unfair to compare any team to the Eagles and say, yeah, we look bad because look at what the Eagles are doing and look at what we're not doing. I feel like the Eagles are on an island by themselves. Am I wrong? Who's that second team that you think matches what they do from a roster construction for an office standpoint?
I think the only two that come close in recent memory, and you can poke holes in both of them, would be San Francisco and Dallas.
Yeah.
I think Dallas, with the extensions to Dak as the highest paid quarterback, CD as the highest paid wide receiver, and then down the pipe with Micah going to be the highest paid edge rusher. I think that's, certainly puts them close. They had Zach Martin on the offensive line until this year, one of the best, if not the best guards in football. I think that's probably pretty close. And then the better answer is probably San Francisco with their linebacking core, Dre Greenlaw, and Fred Warner, and Nick Bosa, and Eric Armstead, and DeForest Buckner at one point, and Debo and Ayuk and McCaffrey and everyone on that team. I think that's pretty close to a super team. And we know the cap hell they're in now, which is why they had to move Debo Samuel. And we're talking about whether or not they're going to even extend Brock Purdy. But even those two teams, you don't have the top to bottom payroll that the Eagles have. And I think the biggest example of that, or reason for that, is because no one drafts like the Eagles. There's not a team in the NFL that drafts as good as the Eagles draft. So there's not a team in the NFL with the cap flexibility to extend all these guys. If you have, 8, 9 guys on the defensive side of the football playing on a rookie contract where you're able to save a lot of money, we talk about it with quarterbacks all the time, but it's the case with every marquee position, edge rusher, linebacker, really any position on the field. If you're on a rookie contract, you're saving money if you're really good. So the fact that they're able to draft gives them this flexibility, and I don't think any other teams can draft that well.
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals, I said it yesterday, and, I still have this belief that you can survive without T. Higgins. I think you can survive without Trey Hendrickson. My question, though, is can you draft? Can you replace it? And that's kind of what Jacob was just saying there. Other teams are able to do it. The New England Patriots, they never paid, they never had the highest. They might have actually, but they never paid the highest at all positions, right? Tom Brady would take pay cuts, and they'd find ways to just build winning rosters. They'd be great at the draft. I think that if you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, they haven't been good at drafting. They really haven't. They were gifted Jamar Chase. They were gifted, and really the Jamar Chase thing was a coin flip. Do you want Sewell or do you want Jamar Chase?
Both all pros.
So that's your coin flip there. It was given to you. Joe Burrow, given to you. And those were objectively their best draft picks, right? T. Higgins, again, that's a great pick. But moving on, I don't have a lot of faith that the Cincinnati Bengals are able to draft well, and I don't think they're great at bringing in new talent either. So if it comes down to taking the gamble that I'm going to ask the Cincinnati Bengals to do something that I don't think they're very good at, or I can just keep the talent that you currently have. And by the way, financially, you absolutely can keep the talent that you have. 100%. Now, we talked about it yesterday that they probably wouldn't do anything after it, but you can keep the talent that you have. And that's why I want them to do that, because I think it's the better option of the two in my mind. I understand the argument. You want to pay the entire defense. I get it. That's trusting the Bengals organization to do that, and I don't trust the Bengals.
Yeah, and I think and you bring up the 49ers too, and for the longest time it just felt like the Niners were able to do a lot of that stuff because they haven't had a high, they haven't been paying their quarterback. I mean, they, not Kaepernick, I'm sorry. When you look at, who's the guy they got from the Patriots? Why am I drawing a blank? Jimmy Garoppolo, sorry. Jimmy Garoppolo, they paid a good chunk of money too, but it wasn't a ton. You look at Trey Lance, that project failed. Obviously, they've been riding the rookie contract of Brock Purdy at this point. So they've been able to get away with extending a lot of these major positions because they haven't had a lot of money piped into the quarterback position. The Eagles have a $50 million a year quarterback. Now you have a $20+ million a year running back. You look at A.J. Brown, you look at Devontae Smith, you look at that offensive line, you look at what they have on defense. That's what just makes them so unique at this point. Now, can they sustain it? I don't think they care at this point. The thing is, it's kind of like a few years ago with the Rams where they were just doing something unprecedented, just getting rid of every draft pick possible, the F them picks mentality. But they got a Super Bowl out of it, so it's like they got what they wanted. If you're going to go all in like that, if you're going to be aggressive like that, if you're going to be what some viewed as reckless, you better have something to show for it on the other end. And they did. The Eagles could do this. It may catch up with them and backfire at some point, but they at least have a Super Bowl now, maybe 2 after next year at this point, to come out on the other side and say, well, we're going to be in cap hell for a little bit, but we at least have a Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowls to show for it. What do you have to show for it? Be aggressive. What do you have to show for it? I think is going to be the mentality. I'm just curious if what the Eagles are doing is sustainable. Time will tell.
They're proactive. They've got money. They have a plan, and they execute it. The Bengals aren't proactive. They don't have a plan, seemingly. And now you sit here as the media just points a finger at the Bengals and says they'll never pay him. They'll never pay him. And I think that's the difference. Are the Eagles one of one? Maybe, yeah. But they've proved that it can work what they're doing. The NFL, everybody plays under the same rule. Everybody has a salary cap, and you can all figure out a way to maneuver that. The Bengals right now are in a tough place because when you wait until the last second, now you got to do some tricky maneuvering.
Yeah, who's that? Obviously, you can't compare the Bengals to the Eagles, but who's that team that you say the Bengals could at least be that? Right? Like, I think we've had this conversation before, like the Rays for the Reds. Like, the Reds can't look at the Dodgers and say we could be that, but we could be the Rays if we draft and develop well and are selective with our spend. Who's that comp for the Bengals that you're like, man, we're not good now as far as how we handle our rosters and money, but, man, if we could just be like this team, we'll be fine. Who is that for you?
I don't think there's a comparison. The baseball world is so drastically different. We're saying we want to be like the Rays because the Rays have had minor success with not spending any money. Obviously, I say minor success. They've been very good. They just haven't won the World Series. I know I weigh that differently than other people. That's fine. In terms of what the Bengals can do, the Bengals can be whoever the hell they want to be. They just aren't. The Bengals can be the Eagles if they wanted to be the Eagles. They can be whoever they wanted. Sell a portion of the team. I don't care. You have the ability to do whatever anybody else is doing in the NFL. That's why everybody's so mad at baseball, and that's probably why there's going to be a lockout here in a couple of years, because it's not the same playing field. You're on different levels, right? You have John Fisher with the Athletics who's letting his stadium crumble to the ground. We got possums running throughout. They're not paying a damn player. I think they just had their highest paid contract this offseason, and I forget which pitcher it was, a former Yankee, whatever. Severino. I think they're in such a drastic different world, a different universe, that it's not comparable. The Bengals can be the Patriots if they wanted to build good rosters and be a dynasty. They have the quarterback to do so. I'm not going to compare Joe Burrow to Tom Brady, but we have a damn good quarterback. And when you have that damn good quarterback, the Bengals can be whoever they want to be. The fact of the matter is they've missed the playoffs back-to-back years. I'm aware that some of it's because of an injury. But the Bengals have that ability, and just give them the out and say, you can be the Chiefs, right? You can pay your quarterback and not a whole lot else and still be good. You can do that, sure, but you can also be the Eagles. And they aren't, and they won't be.
I do completely disagree with that sentiment. I don't think the Bengals can just be any team they want in the NFL. You don't have a scouting department. You don't have owners with cash. You can't just do that unless you change the way your organization is run and your ownership structure. So working with what we have in Cincinnati right now, I think the best chance for the Bengals to be good isn't to shoot for the Eagles and try to pay everyone at the top of their market, because I don't think you're going to be able to do that. But it's also important to remember that's not what we're asking them to do this offseason. Extending T and Trey Hendrickson does not put them on par with the Eagles. They still have a long way to go. The Eagles are paying 3 offensive linemen $20 million. They're paying a lot of guys on defense big money. Extending these guys doesn't put them in the Eagles stratosphere. It just puts them in the stratosphere of a team that's trying to compete. The team I would circle for a philosophy I would try to match and follow and to get to a consistency where they've been for the last 2 years is the Detroit Lions. And I think the thing with them that really jumps off the page to me is something that Reed and I have talked about a lot as we prepare for draft season in the NFL, and it's they're not scared to take great players. And they took Jahmyr Gibbs high. They took Jack Campbell high. They took Penei Sewell at 5 when he fell to them. That one, not quite as much of a shock because he was talked about being that high, but all these great players at positions, moving Penei Sewell from left tackle to right tackle, and that was a scare to a lot of people. And the willingness to take guys that aren't blue chip prospects, but you think are going to be really good, that's how the Bengals have to operate, because they're not going to go sign studs at linebacker or sign studs at edge rusher, because by the time they get good enough, by the time Zach Bond has a breakout season in Philadelphia and he's a free agent, they're outpriced of Cincinnati. Their Bengals aren't going to be able to match the asking price for all pro guys in free agency. So go get those guys in the draft. I think if the Bengals get off a lot of the stuff that they've worked on in the past, drafting specific body types, drafting specific colleges over production, draft college production, draft guys who have been really, really good. And if you change that philosophy to operate in the way that the Eagles do in a lot of cases, and to operate in the way that the Lions do during draft season, I think you're going to be able to get to late January, early February a lot more often than not, because you're keeping players early in that draft that are going to make immediate impacts on that rookie contract when they're the cheapest.
My point being, though, and we'll see if you agree with this one, Kinner's saying he's comparing, which philosophy the Bengals or which philosophy. I'm saying in terms of success, right? If the Bengals want to have success, you have that ability. The Kansas City Chiefs, they play in Missouri. I wouldn't exactly call it a beautiful destination in the great state of America. No disrespect to Missouri, but it's like they've built up a dynasty. A dynasty that arguably has only happened one other time in our lifetime, maybe in all of the NFL, and they've done that. Not even doing it the Eagles' way. They've done it doing it their way. And that success is attainable, is my point. I don't think
the Chiefs couldn't do it the Eagles' way. It'd be impossible.
Sure, but they can do it their way and still have success. I'm saying that the Bengals have the ability to be successful. I guess but
the Bengals' way doesn't work.
Sure,
so he's asking which team's way would make that work.
Correct. I guess that's where the disconnect is. But I do think that in the NFL it's so drastically different than Major League Baseball. The Reds could never have a dynasty ever. In a million billion years, the Cincinnati Reds will never have a dynasty. I think in the NFL, I think the Bengals could have a dynasty. I think the Chiefs could have a dynasty. I think the Eagles could have a dynasty. I think it's just all about what the rules are for everybody else, and the salary cap makes that possible. I think the restructuring of all these deals makes it possible. I think the NFL makes it possible. That's why it's the best league.
Well, and the reason I brought up the Reds and the Rays comparison is because I think both face similar roadblocks. The Reds and Dodgers don't face similar roadblocks. I don't think the Bengals and Eagles face similar roadblocks. So that's why for the Reds and the Rays, like that's a franchise that, like, if the Reds get all their ducks in a row to model the way they run things like the Rays, I would love that. I think a lot of Reds fans would. I mean, we would rather them be the Dodgers, no doubt, but we understand the restrictions and the roadblocks in the way. So what teams have similar makeups and roadblocks, and how did they navigate through it? And that's what I meant for the Bengals. They can't be the Eagles. They'll never be, at least with this ownership group, they can't be the Eagles. So that's why I was like, what ownership group or what team has similar type of ownership, similar type of roadblocks, and how they kind of build theirs. I think the Lions, that's a perfect example, as far as that goes. And Elliot, you bring up the salary cap in football. I'm not going to lie. Does it feel like there's a salary cap in football? There's so many different teams that operate so completely different. It is wild. Like a salary cap, it just evens the playing field. It's just created a whole other unfair playing field from the cash perspective, and it's just kind of wild how it's been manipulated that way. It makes it interesting. It makes it fun. Not fun, though, when your team obviously isn't spending the way that others are, but either way. All right, off-season is going to be heating up soon. The Joe Tooney move was huge, I think is interesting. Obviously, it's good for the Bears. The Chiefs, not really sure what their plan is. Their big weakness in that Super Bowl loss was just how bad they were up front, and that's one of your better up front players, and you move on from them. They must have a plan in place. We'll see what that is. Obviously, a lot of big-name wide receivers on the free agent market right now, big names. Big talent, that's still up for debate. We'll talk more about that later on as well. But NFL offseason is going to be interesting, obviously. Not just the same talking points with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and others. Hopefully the Bengals make a move fairly quickly just to make things. I don't count the tag, right? When they tagged T. Higgins, I wasn't surprised by that. I didn't think that was breaking news. I thought the people that were shocked by it, I'm like, I don't know. What do you read when you follow this team? What reports what reporters work are you following? Like, this wasn't surprising to us, at least, no doubt.